Hello, farm members. Welcome to our inaugural edition of Locked In with Kim. I'm so happy that I'm with Curry today. It gave me a reason to actually put on real clothes, at least real top. I still have my sweatpants on, but I've got makeup on and my glasses on. And if you all are anything like me, you've already eaten most of your kids' Easter candy and watched, binge watched Tiger King. So what about what happens when this is all over? What do we have to go back to when this is over? So I am pleased to be joined today with Curry Roberts. He is the president of the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance that we've had a long and excellent collaboration with over the years. So Curry, thank you for joining us. How are you and your family doing?
Oh, we're doing great. Thank you for asking. And like you, I had to get up and put on an appropriate shirt this morning, and I shaved. And
I feel so honored. Thank you.
I assumed you were doing your makeup, so I thought I'd try to match you with what we needed to do on our end.
First time in 3 weeks. It feels good.
I'm sorry?
Normal. First time in 3 weeks of actually getting ready for something. It feels good to go back to normal a little bit.
It does. It does.
So that's a great segue into my question for you is, we're all sitting here in our houses in Fredericksburg, not going to our favorite restaurants, our favorite places. Maybe we're getting some takeaway, but we're not doing things like we used to. What are your 3 takeaways for realtors to keep in mind when we're thinking about our local economy?
I think, it was interested to read what the head of the Federal Reserve said over the weekend that, and she's not the first economist I've listened to who said this, but it was a great recognition on her part, that you have to remember, unlike in 2008, our economy was rolling along and in really good shape. It was not overheated. There weren't any bubbles. We'd had very consistent, steady growth. That what's happened here is not a failure of the economy. It's an outside influence for what has happened to seize up a big portion of the economy. So the first thing to remember is this is very, very different than '08. There is not a problem with financial institutions. There's not a collapse of residential real estate prices. There's not a seizing up of the construction industry. In many ways, the construction industry continues to move forward. So I think trying to keep those 3 things in perspective are helpful. And I think hopeful that if we are able to move out of this by June, most of the forecasts I'm looking at is that you'll return to positive growth in the United States by the 4th quarter of this year or the 1st quarter of next year.
Okay, great. So I'm looking ahead. June 11th is when this order expires. Let's just say that it continues to then, right? What does Caroline and William Street, what does Central Park look like come June 11th?
Well, I think from a foot traffic standpoint, I think it depends on what the governor says and whether he is saying everything's fine to go back to normal. I'm not sure he's going to say that. I think what he's going to advise people to do is just to continue to keep some caution until we see where we are with the remnants of the virus that are still out there. Do the summer months kill it? I don't know exactly how to answer that as it relates to retail. I can tell you from the inquiries that we're getting and the prospects that we're working with now, and we are still working with prospects, they're around 2 areas that are very interesting. Data centers, and there was an article in Virginia Business today that in some cases they've had a surge of almost 50% of daily demand for capacity within the data centers. If that continues, I think you're going to see that growth. We already were experiencing quite a bit of interest from that industry, but I think that's going to continue to increase because I think some people's habits are going to change from how they communicate, like we are here, as well as how they order goods and services, which leads to the second one. We're getting a significant number of inquiries for people looking at their supply chain and how they're doing distribution, how they're doing logistics. So I think our market is going to continue to see quite a bit of interest from folks for distribution and logistics. How that impacts retail, I think that remains to be seen. I don't know. What I do think, as soon as people, we're social animals by nature. So the sooner restaurants reopen, the sooner bars reopen, I think they're going to do a very good business. This is very, very painful for them.
Right.
Within our region, and something I should have mentioned in the beginning was why this is also a little bit different than '08, even locally. and where I think the rebound will be quicker than it was even then, even though we did not have much of a dip in '08. I know it didn't feel that way if you're in the real estate market, but if you
Certainly
look at the
not. Right.
broader economy, our region never really went negative in that period. We've got 178,000 people who are in the workforce who live in the region, who either live and work in the region or commute out. And 14, 15,000 of those folks are employed in the hospitality industry. So hotels, restaurant, tourism, travel. That's a big number. It is painful. But those types of jobs, once the demand comes back or the ability to get out and to do some things for the other 164,000 people in the region who are continuing to work primarily remotely these days, they're going to want to get out. So I think you could see a quick reflex rebound for the restaurant industry once we get to the other side of this.
That's good to hear. I'm excited to get back to my favorite places, that's for sure. So I kind of have a two-part question from a wider look at the economy. So we're meeting online now. Obviously, business is being conducted through Zoom and other outlets. How do you see sort of the way that we do business evolving and changing as we move forward? I'm thinking about conferences and meetings at the expo center. Will those things kind of eventually creep back to normal, or are you anticipating from maybe more than just Fredericksburg, but a sort of global sea change in how we do business, and how's our local economy respond to that? And then I want to ask about broadband after.
Okay. We've batted this around our team. One of the things that we're working on and we believe is that business travel is probably going to be the slowest to come back. That because we're able to do more of this and people have become more comfortable with it, we think in dealing with prospects in the first round, what they're going to want to see is or video footage of our sites. So we've been working with Dominion and with Rappahannock Electric to take the 30, 35 primary sites that we promote and have those flown with drones. So we can add that to the information file on each one of those sites. And I can see for a while, we're probably going to be on line like this and separately being able through WebEx or a system like that to give them virtual tours, just like you all do virtual home tours today. I could see that becoming a much earlier use and one that where they're trying to reduce the number of times they have to travel here. Just like people would try to reduce how many homes they want to go look at.
Right.
I can see that type of demand for that capability increasing pretty dramatically over the next year.
Okay. So then moving on to broadband, I know we had talked before we started recording that you're at your lake house, and I had just come from my parents' lake house, and we have absolutely no internet connection right now. There's just so many owners and people at the lake trying to do this, watching Netflix. You can't even watch a movie. So I need to come back to Fredericksburg to be able to conduct work via Zoom. So that's a real issue, especially for people who are looking to purchase and come down here. It's hard to make your primary residence a place where, especially in light of what's going on now, you don't have reliable internet connectivity. Do you see this crisis moving the needle on investment from the private sector, investment from the public side to deploy greater broadband capability?
I do think it's going to come from the public sector, not necessarily the private sector, because last mile is such a challenge. Now you've got the rural electric co-ops are stepping in across, their footprints to allow opening up for the last mile service for their members. That they have found a way to do that. It has taken some federal tweaks to allow them to do that. So I think in areas served by rural electrics, I think you'll see improvements. I don't think it's going to be, from a political standpoint, I think what's going to drive that is much more of the educational inequity that exists in areas that are underserved by broadband for their children to stay up to date through this period,
Sure.
as in areas where broadband is more vibrant and fiber is more readily available. That is where I think you move the political needle and to have the public sector step in and either through public-private partnerships or some type of utility-driven solution to increasing broadband capacity, especially in rural areas.
Absolutely. Makes sense. And my son does a lot of work online. We're starting to do Zoom meetings. We can't do that from the lake. So I feel bad for those folks who are out there with, really subpar, very low speeds. Can't even get on a Zoom call. It doesn't
Yeah.
work. So that's challenging for students. And it's a long time. And you're looking at 10 weeks of educating these kids. I know I'm struggling with that, and I've got great internet connectivity. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so looking at your crystal ball, I will not hold you to any of these predictions, but looking at the crystal ball, when it's New Year's Eve 2020 and we are looking to say sayonara to 2020 and hopefully the coronavirus, what do you think? What kind of year are we going to say that we had? How is this going to? It feels very dire to me right now if you watch the news, but when we're, 8, 9 months from now, what are we going to say about 2020?
Well, and if we don't have enough other things to worry about, it's also a federal election year. So we'll
Oh, right, right. There's that.
what this process will maybe fortunately do is contract the political campaign season because you can't have conventions until July or August,
Right.
and so you may be able to where we really don't have an election or campaign except from Labor Day to Election Day. Um, Given just what we're seeing, what we're hearing, that this is going to be a very steep recession. It's going to be very, very painful for a number of sectors, and we've talked about some of those. But there's going to be a fairly quick rebound. So I think we're going to look back and say, gee, this was a painful year. It was a painful year for the economy. It was a painful year for people that were infected, for families who've lost members who contracted the coronavirus. So I think there's going to have to be some reflection on that, and that's going to be painful to look at. On the other hand, I think as we look into 2021, I think there's going to be some optimism that we'll be back to something in the 2%, 2 to 2.5% GDP growth, and maybe hopefully out of this, we'll find a path back to finding bipartisan solutions to challenges instead of everything being somehow a partisan football.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm way over optimistic, but coming in from lunch behind me. But anyway, that's my wife, Irene.
Hello.
But in our, economic development, marketing is not entirely different from real estate sales, whether it's commercial or residential. It's the same process, and we have to be upbeat and optimistic by nature because it's the nature of the industries we're in.
Absolutely. So one final question. Will the Fred Nats play in their new stadium this year, or do you see the baseball season getting canceled? I drove by the other day. It's looking good.
Yeah, it is looking good. I think what'll happen is it'll probably be contracted again, a compacted season, depending on where we are in June. And we may be fine, but some of the teams in other states who need to come here to play, they may have a longer tail on their season with this virus. So I think it'd be kind of fun if we had like a early fall 60-day baseball season.
Yeah.
It'd be a little different.
Yeah, it would be.
And I think
get back out and see that.
Yeah, it would be, especially outdoors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Curry, thank you so much for your time. I hope to see you next time in person, and wish you and the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance great success during this time of upheaval. But I know that you're working hard on our behalf, and we are looking at better days ahead. So thank you for your uplifting message.
Thank you for having me, Kim, and my best wishes to all of your members as they work their way through this.
All right. Good to see you, Curry.
Take care, Kim.